In 8 years, this is our first town hall meeting at a McDonald's, so we've broken new ground this morning. But what a great facility and great addition this is to the community, and thanks to McDonald's for hosting us this morning. It's great to be here. The senator sent me a message as I was driving in that said that he had some housekeeping things to finish up and that we're going to be starting a little bit late. And I said, well, that's fine, I'm 2 blocks away, from the stoplight, because there's a line at the stoplight. I have never in all my years of growing up in this area sat in a 2 to 3 block line at this stoplight, but I got to this morning, so it's still hard for me to realize. As the senator was talking to me this morning driving in, he said, well, depending on traffic, I'll be there at such and such a time. I said, well, depending on traffic, I'll be there. That's such a strange phrase to use in northwest Oklahoma, but we're all using it now. As the senator mentioned, I'm chairing the Public Safety Appropriations and Budget Committee this year, in the session this year and next year, which has the budgetary authority over the Department of Corrections, the Department of Public Safety, which includes Highway Patrol, the Medical Examiner's Office, CLEAT, trains law enforcement around the state. All of those entities, Homeland Security, OSBI, etc., which I think is a critical committee for our part of the state. I have 3 prisons in my district. At Alva, Helena, and Fort Supply, and I'm well aware of the staffing problem that we have there. We have to invest some more dollars there. We have to have some relief. We have to have more bed space. That may mean some private contractors as well. It's going to take a combination of a lot of things to address this and continue to move forward on our corrections reform efforts and funding those things that we've put in place the last few years. So a very critical time and a critical committee, I believe, for our area. And Senator Marlette is always very supportive of those issues. And he mentioned the Highway Patrol as well. We are now 14th, 15th, 16th, somewhere in that range in pay for our state troopers. That means there's over a dozen police departments that you can go work for in Oklahoma and make more money than you can as a state trooper and know where you're going to be, know what town you're going to live in. You're not going to worry about whether you may get assigned to Idabel or Lawton. You're going to know you're going to be in Edmond every single day. You know you're going to be home at night, and you know that if you get in trouble, help's just a couple of minutes away, versus if you're out at Camp Houston and you have an incident and you have trouble, that help may be 20 or 30 minutes away. It's become very difficult for us to attract cadets to apply for our Highway Patrol Academy. We're down to just a few hundred applying, and we're graduating 30 to 40. Almost 60% of our troopers will be able to retire in the next couple of years, and we're not replacing them at that rate. You all know that. You're not seeing as many on the roads. For those of you that hurry, that's probably not necessarily a bad thing. But what is very concerning to me is our accident rates, particularly in Troop J in this part of the state, and you guys are very familiar with that. It's unacceptable that we just don't have the troopers, either the size and weight troopers to do truck enforcement, or the road troopers to do traffic enforcement that we used to have. And we're seeing higher accident rates, we're seeing more fatalities, and I'm very, very concerned about that, and this community knows that all too well. We've got to have some more money to invest in that area to put more troopers on the roads. It's a public safety issue, and it's a life and death issue, both for corrections and for the Highway Patrol, and those are 2 of my priorities chairing that committee. I'm on the Full Appropriations and Budget Committee this session as well. I'm also on the Agriculture and Wildlife Committee and the Energy and Aerospace Committee. So probably in my 8 years, really in the terms of the committees that impact this part of the state the most, probably the critical areas. We did have a bill come through the Appropriations and Budget Committee I want to mention to you. This week I did vote against it. It did pass, but you may remember from probably 6, 7, 8 years ago, Oklahoma talked about TABOR, or the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. Other states like Colorado had implemented this to reduce their state spending to force budget cuts. Colorado then turned around and repealed that because it created such a disaster in their state. That was proposed here, and then it was quickly realized it was not working in other states, and so that went away. The TABOR bill is back this year. It passed out of the Appropriations Committee in the House. In Oklahoma, we currently have a cap that our appropriations can be 12% plus inflation greater than the previous year. We never get to that point. That is very rare. Usually it's 3 or 4% that our state budget might grow in good years. The problem is that in those bad years, when you make significant budget cuts, and then you're able to come back the next year and the economy improves, and you're able to restore some of those cuts. And then you also have things like perhaps preparing the state capitol that if you can't get a bond issue done, you may pay cash for. The expenditures that you have to make are emergency expenditures that we can't plan for today. it concerns me that we're going to handcuff ourselves for a news release that 3 or 4 years down the road we may be trying to figure out how to back out of because we have real struggles. So that bill did pass. Again, I think it's a solution in search of a problem. We're just not growing our budget by 15% every year in Oklahoma. We're a balanced budget state. We're a conservative state. I'm just not certain that that's a necessary bill to move forward. But nonetheless, it's passed the Appropriations Committee and could be considered on the floor of the House. One of the other issues that I'm working on, as we've had more manufacturing facilities and wind farms growing in Oklahoma, our economy's improved. We have incentives on the books to help do that. One of the incentives is a 5-year exemption on property tax for manufacturing facilities. And wind farms are considered manufacturing facilities because they're manufacturing electricity, so they're considered in this as well. When this tax credit program or this ad valorem exemption program was put on the books, it was before we were in the legislature. The Democrats were in the majority, and one of the ways that they got the support of the education community was to say, you're only getting X amount of money on the cow pasture out there undeveloped. We're going to recruit this business in, and they're going to invest millions of dollars, but we're not going to give you the gain on the property tax for 5 years, because in order to get them to invest and come to Oklahoma, we're going to have to give them no property tax for 5 years. But for the schools and counties, we'll go ahead and give you what you would have gotten if they had come anyway, knowing they wouldn't have come without the incentive. You're going to get the jobs, the people moving into your community, the students in your school system, but the added benefit was we'll go ahead and pay the gain too. That worked well for a few years, but it's not sustainable. It's gotten to the point the last several years that the state's not been able to afford the 40, 50, 60, 70 million dollars that has cost us. That has created tremendous cash flow problems for school districts, because what happens is for every dollar of that property tax, or any property tax that a school gets, they lose $1 of state aid. Well, they lose the $1 of state aid because the state owes them that money under this incentive program, but the state is 6, 8, 9, 10 months behind on having the revenue coming in from the income tax to be able to pay those claims. So it creates a huge cash flow problem for school districts, and we've got to find a way to address that. We are the only state that reimburses on that gain. No one else does that. Texas allows a county option, which I think makes a lot more sense, where your county commissioners would have the authority, in consultation with your school officials and others who might be affected, career tech, those that rely on property tax, to say we have a chance to bring in a manufacturing facility to Alva, or we have a chance to bring in a wind farm to Woods County. And the county commissioners, in consultation with the others affected by the ad valorem, would say, well, what's it worth to us? We're only getting $500 on the pasture out there right now, and we have the potential to get several thousand. What's it worth to us? And the county commissioners would be able to develop a package that might say, well, we'll give you no property tax for 3 years and 50% off the last 2 years, or we'll give you 10% off for 5 years. It would be a local decision to develop those incentive packages, because you know best what that's worth. And the county might say, we're willing to give up the gain on the property tax for all 5 years, knowing that investment will be here for the next 50 years, and it will benefit our schools and our county government. So that's what Texas does. It's worked well there, and that may be something we look at. The bottom line is we can't afford to continue to do the program the way we're doing it. It's not sustainable. It's creating huge cash flow problems for school districts that are impacted by this program. I think the senator probably talked about the capital. I remain convinced that I think the senator probably forgot to talk about the capital, but we both agree and remain convinced that with interest rates at the point where they are, and the bankers in the room will tell you that money is cheap, and I'm sure they'd love to loan you some, particularly in the environment they're in right now. It makes a lot of sense for us to do a bond issue to repair the capital. The capital maintenance has been ignored for decades. It's unacceptable, but we're to the point where we have to fix something. Within 5 years, the building will be condemned. It will not be usable, and which may not be all bad. The legislature just goes somewhere else, I guess. But the Capitol had a dirt floor when it was initially completed, and the sewer lines are underneath that. Water lines are underneath that. They came in and simply poured asphalt over the dirt floor, as you can imagine, which was probably not the best idea. And then they put the terrazzo over the top of the asphalt. We now have these sewer lines that are breaking down underneath that, and there's not much there between the sewer lines that are breaking down. We've actually become, the Capitol's sitting on a huge leach field is what has happened now as these sewer lines have broken, and you'll smell that from time to time in the Capitol as that leaches up through that what little floor doors there in the bottom of the
Carnival cruise.
much like a Carnival cruise. Are you getting paid to make that commercial announcement for Carnival? The electrical, the wiring, the same wiring that was there when the building was first built. It's a wonderful treasure that our predecessors have left us in this state. It's a wonderful symbol of our state. I think it's a terrible symbol when you come visit the Capitol and there's barricades across the front stairs and you can't walk up the front door of your state capitol because the limestone's falling off the outside of the building and it might hit you. That's an embarrassment. We've got to fix the building. We need to do it with a bond issue. That way we make the decision, it's done. We do it now while interest rates are very cheap, and we get the project finished, and then we appropriate the payment to do that. We've attempted to do a bond issue. I've got a bill actually sent it to a vote of the people. Let the people decide if that's something that you want done with the state capitol, and a lot of other options are out there. But we remain convinced that that makes the most sense with your dollars is to do that. We have a very low bonded indebtedness in Oklahoma compared to most other states, and that makes the most sense to do a project like that rather than nickel and diming $10 million this year. Well, we might do $20 million next year, or we might not because something else comes up. And it doesn't work, and the project gets started and never get finished. The other issue, state question that we've passed out of committee that may be coming to your ballot is a prohibition on legislators working for state agencies. We have a 2-year prohibition on legislators leaving office and working for state agencies if they're paid with appropriated funds. Well, state agencies have now been finding ways to pay with fees, to pay with federal dollars, to do other things, and that was not the intent of the Constitution for legislators to be able to leave and work for state agencies. That actually has been on the books since the 30s when the legislature met every other year. That's why the 2-year prohibition was put in place. I have put language in a state question that come to voters to say it's a 2-year probation period. It doesn't matter where the money comes from. You cannot go work for a state agency. That would be how we address that. But because the legislature meets every year now instead of every 2 years, the purpose of that was you couldn't create yourself a job and then go take that job without the legislature being able to come back and review that and say, no, Senator, you can't create yourself a job. We're removing that from the budget. It was to put a legislative session between the end of service and the ability to go to work for a school district as a school teacher, for example, or as a correctional officer, or as an agency director. I mean, it could be any of those things. And there may be people that want to come serve that want to go back to being teachers or professors or those types of things. And that ban prohibits that. So the question that we're sending would put a legislative session between the time a legislator left office before they could go back to work for a school system or a university or a state agency, those types of entities. Basically July 1 of the year following their term in office, which is when the new budget would kick in after the legislature had met following their term of office. And I think put some teeth in what you all thought we had in place already. A lot of other issues that are floating around. Education, obviously, is always a big issue. Deregulation of our schools, letting school boards have more local control of school districts is a topic I think we'll be looking at this year, and I'll get some legislation on that as well, as do a lot of other members. Operational dollars for schools. A lot of our agencies have taken budget cuts and haven't had a way to replace that, and schools, particularly in the area of operations, have not had new dollars in a long time. Just the money to pay for fuel for the buses and keep the lights on and the doors unlocked. Just operational dollars. Costs have gone up, and we haven't put money into operations for a long, long time. We all know how expensive fuel is and all those other costs that come along every year. And for common education, they've been particularly hard hit with those costs. So we'll be looking at those things as well. Let me mention just lastly the Medicaid issue, and there continues to be a debate about what we do with Medicaid and how we interact with the federal health care laws that the Supreme Court's now deemed as constitutional, and what that means for Oklahoma. Currently, Oklahoma receives federal dollars for health care in Oklahoma. We receive a lot of federal dollars, over $1 billion. I think probably $1.5 to $2 billion, I would guess, for healthcare spending in Oklahoma that comes in the form of Medicaid dollars, federal dollars from the federal government that ensures healthcare services operate across our state. Those dollars that we've been receiving are being transferred over under the new federal healthcare law to come in. Instead of coming in through this door, those same dollars are now going to come in through this door under the federal healthcare law. It's the same money we've been getting. It's just going to come a different way under the new federal health care law. But the governor has decided that Oklahoma will not participate in the Medicaid expansion. A lot of other states kind of all over the board. Arizona, Governor Brewer there has decided Arizona will participate. Florida's participating. Governor Kasich in Ohio. It's not really a Democrat or Republican issue because those are very conservative governors that their states are participating in this Medicaid program. Governor Fallon's decided Oklahoma will not. I am concerned that we don't have a backup plan if we don't do that. I have huge problems with the individual mandate in the federal health care law. I don't agree with it. I don't like it. I think it's very problematic, and I don't think it's right. I don't want the federal government telling me I have to buy a certain brand of vehicle or a number of things. So I have huge problems with that. But the federal dollars we've been getting for decades for health care is now coming through this door over here through this new program. And if we don't find a way to fund that, I am told that a third of our hospitals will close within the next 2 years. That is a tremendous problem because that means places like Alva and Fairview, that means places like Sealing and Shattuck. That means a lot of communities in our area, like O'Keene and others, will not have hospitals within the next couple of years if we don't find a way to address this solution. It's very problematic, and I know it makes for a great press release, and I understand all of that. The bottom line is we're taking the federal dollars now for this program. They're coming through this new door, and if we say this door's not open, we're creating a huge problem for those of us in rural areas, for those of us in this community that have a hospital that won't in the next 2 years if we don't find an alternative to address this or we don't reconsider that portion of the federal health care law. Again, I don't agree with the individual mandate. I don't agree with a lot of what's in the federal health care law, but we've got to find a way to keep access points open, particularly in our rural areas. And so we've got to sort that out. And it's a very complicated issue, a lot more complicated than just an internet blog or somewhere else. We've got to figure out the answers to that. I don't know if the federal government, I'm sure they're not going to separate that money out and put it just in a different program so that it's more palatable. But the bottom line is the dollars we've taken forever to keep our hospitals open and nursing homes open is coming through the new federal health care law. And we're deciding that we're not going to take those dollars anymore, which is a huge budget hit for our rural hospitals. I don't have an answer. I just want you to be aware of the problem and understand it's a very complicated issue, a lot more complicated than 30 seconds on the and it's one we all need to be very, very serious about and thinking about because it can impact all of us when we get in those situations where we're in critical need of a doctor or an emergency room and there's one available about an hour from you. I'm going to stop there and we'll be happy to answer some more questions.
I want to touch on what he just said. It's somewhat of a growing problem in the legislature that the sexiest thing to do is to come up with a press release that's anti-federal government and anti-Obama, and then you have to stand behind what you say on that press release. And a one-page press release on we don't want Medicaid and we don't want Obamacare, but then have to govern and decide, how we're going to put an exchange in place that is mandated and that they've proven is constitutional. I mean, we still got people saying that it's not constitutional. Well, last time I checked the Supreme Court decides that, and they said this is tax and it's constitutional. So I don't like it any more than the next guy, but a lot of these people get elected. Obama's been really good for a lot of Republicans in the state, and a lot of people get elected running against Obama, and so they continue to do whatever they can. Just if they can make it look like they're anti-Obama, they can keep people charged up. But they've got to figure out at some point you've got to govern and make choices that you may not like it, but it's a choice you have to make, and it's something that you have to do. So. I think the House has probably got a lot more problems with that, with the turnover we've had in the last couple of years. But it's a growing problem in the legislature.
I think we're all committed to making sure that we're protecting our rights as a state to govern ourselves as we can under the laws that we have. But there's also got to be a little bit of common sense. And if those federal funds that we're all sending to Washington on April 15th are coming back to us in a program and have for decades, and now they're switched over here, if we're saying, well, we're not going to take them, then those dollars, that's fine. The governor of California is sitting there marking off every state that's not going to take those dollars because he needs them. Same thing in Michigan and other places. It's got to be some balance and some common sense. And again, that doesn't mean that we're going to participate in federal programs that are going to have significant strings attached or not be in the best interest of Oklahoma. It's got to be a balance, and sometimes the rhetoric loses the balance. Fire Chief was just talking to me about our continued highway projects that we continue to do. I mentioned briefly, but this is the transportation expert. He can talk more about it than I can. We continue to have multiple projects in this area on the books, specifically here at bridges. We've got the Super 2-lane project going east of here. We're to the county line, the Alfalfa County line, but that is on the books to be completed all the way to Medford. Ultimately have a great road from Alva to I-35, and also from Alva going south. The rest of the Super 2-lane has to be completed from Greensburg around to Carmen down to Clio, and give us a great road from Alva south to Watonga and on to Oklahoma City. So those projects are on the books. There's some county projects I know from Avard, Tacoma, Lambert, Hewitt, Carmen, those roads that a lot of you use as well that are in terrible shape, that are multi-county circuit engineering district projects that should be beginning very soon as well. We've had a lot more pressure on our infrastructure than what we typically would have anticipated, and so it's kind of expedited the need to make those repairs, and we're working on that. But Senator, you may want to talk more about that because you're controlling that issue over on the Senate side.
Yeah, we have done a tremendous amount, particularly in the last 6 years. As far as transportation funding, we did some stuff last year that increased what we're giving 5%. Good motor vehicle tax, we raised the cap on what would be in the roads fund. So we're making great strides this year. We've put the resources in their direction. This year, we said, all right, we've done what you've asked. Now go and implement your plan and show us that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, and they're doing that. There's a bill that'll be coming over from the House that increases. It takes a portion of it takes 5% out of the motor vehicle revenue and sends it directly to the counties to address the county needs. But we're trying to do all we can to ramp it up. The problem with the roads is much like the problem with the Capitol. They were ignored for 20-some years, and now we're in a position where we've got to play catch-up all the time. But yeah, we're doing some good things. We had a bill. One of the things we've done, I know you guys are probably familiar with the 8-year plan, but in Oklahoma, we took a lot of the politics out of it, where senators would go in and say, or speakers or whoever, and say, hey,
mainly senators
from eastern Oklahoma, that would say, I want a 4-lane between these two communities, and it would happen. And it was all politically driven. We implemented the 8-year plan that said we're taking the politics out of it. We're going to have the commission do an evaluation annually, decide what roads are needed, what bridges are needed. It's a fluid target because obviously some of the bridges in Woods and Alfalfa County have moved up dramatically on that 8-year plan because of use. So it's always a moving target. We had a bill that came up in transportation this last week that Senator Susan Paddock had it, a great senator from Ada. She wanted to develop a task force to finish a 4-lane road on Highway 99 that had been worked on for the last 10 years and it hasn't ever been finished. It goes 4-lane to 2-lane. She wanted a task force with members of the Senate, members of the House, members of the transportation, tribes, and everybody to come together and see what they needed to do to get this road finished. She was not trying to do anything wrong or anything like that, but I killed her bill for this reason. I think when we start developing, A, if I get appointed to that task force, I'm not going to be happy. But B, if we start developing task force for every road project that needs to be done, we're going to have task force going like crazy all the time, and B, it is a movement in the direction of getting politics back into our road programs, and I think that we need to be doing it on safety, on use, and I think the program that we have is becoming a model for the nation. We're one of the few states that do this. We're the first to start it, and I think it's successful when we let it play out. So our people starting to try to move back in that direction, but we've been able to hold it together